In the year 132 AD, a metal ball fell, but the ground didn't shake. People laughed at the machine. 3 days later, a city was destroyed by an earthquake. The machine was right. Before anyone knew, he didn't hear voices from the gods. He heard the voice of the earth. And Zhang Heng, a scientist from ancient China, was the first person in history to understand it. At a time when earthquakes were seen as punishment from heaven, Zhang built a strange bronze machine. It had dragon heads and frogs sitting around it. People thought it was just decoration. But when one dragon dropped its ball, everything changed. Zhang's machine could detect earthquakes hundreds of kilometers away. Today, over 1,800 years later, modern scientists still don't fully understand how it worked. It was a technology so far ahead of its time. It feels impossible. Did Zhang Heng discover something that even we can't explain? It was a quiet afternoon in Luoyang, the capital of the Eastern Han dynasty. The sky was clear. The wind was soft. People in the village went about their daily lives, hanging clothes, feeding animals, sweeping their yards. Nothing seemed unusual. But suddenly, the ground began to shake. Floors creaked. Cups rattled on tables. Screams broke the silence. People panicked. Children cried. Mothers pulled them outside. The old dropped to their knees and prayed. In their minds, it was clear this was a punishment from heaven. The gods were angry. The emperor must have done something wrong. But in the middle of the chaos, one small boy stood still. His name was Zhang Heng. He was no older than 8. His hands were shaking, but not because of fear. His eyes were fixed on a candle. It was dancing, moving side to side. But there was no wind, no breeze, only the earth moving beneath his feet. And in that moment, he wondered, why is the candle moving without wind? Why is the ground cracking, but the sky is calm? He didn't feel cursed. He felt like the earth was trying to say something. At that time, most people in China believed earthquakes were messages from heaven. If the emperor failed in his duties, the sky would shake the earth in anger. No one thought of earthquakes as natural. They were warnings sent by the gods. But Zhang Heng began to think differently. And there was a reason. The place where he lived, near Luoyang, was in a dangerous zone. The land often moved. There were deep fault lines hidden beneath the soil. The earth in this part of China was never fully still. Small and large earthquakes happen often, sometimes causing big damage. And Zhang Heng had grown up with these tremors. He had felt them, watched them, lived through them. That day changed everything for him. While other children ran from earthquakes, Zhang stayed and listened. He started to observe the world around him. The direction of the wind, the shape of cracks in the ground, the position of stars during tremors. He even made small tools using clay and bamboo to study balance and movement. While other children played, Zhang walked the village with a scroll and brush in his hand, taking notes. People began to whisper, "That boy prefers talking to rocks than to people." Even his teacher was upset. One day, the man scolded him harshly. "Zhang Heng, stop wasting time with stones. You'll never be respected unless you learn to speak in front of the emperor, not in front of mud and bamboo." But Zhang didn't stop. He wasn't trying to be heard by people. He wanted to understand nature. As he grew older, so did his curiosity. He didn't care for fortune-telling or old myths. He believed in facts. He believed in patterns. He began writing down his own ideas, early theories about underground waves, even though that concept didn't exist yet. In one of his scrolls, he wrote something that would define his life. "If the earth can speak, I want to be the first to hear it." Then, years later, the real test came. One day, Zhang noticed something strange. The sky looked normal, but the air pressure felt different. The wind was blowing from an odd direction. He believed a distant earthquake had just happened. So, he sent a report to the royal court. He wrote, "A small movement has come from the west. I believe the region of Longxi has just experienced an earthquake." The officials laughed. "You think you can guess earthquakes like weather?" One said. "Who do you think you are, a messenger from heaven?" Zhang stayed silent. He didn't argue. But 3 days later, a horse rider arrived at the palace. He brought news. A strong earthquake had hit Longxi. Homes had fallen. People had died. Zhang Heng was right. The room, once filled with laughter, went quiet. An old advisor stepped forward. He looked at Zhang and said, "The sky has many voices, but maybe the earth does too, and you're the only one listening." After that day, Zhang returned to his old village. He walked through broken homes and cracked roads. He didn't look afraid. He looked curious. He knelt down, picked up a small rock that had split in two, and held it in his hand. The wind whispered through the empty streets, and he quietly said, "This is not a curse. This is a message." From that moment on, he began to design something, not to predict the future, but to understand the present. An instrument, to hear the voice beneath the ground. The small cracked stone was still in his hand. Its line was thin, running through the middle like a quiet message. Zhang Heng stared at it for a long time, sitting on the same land that once shook when he was a child. Around him, broken buildings still lay in pieces. But in his eyes, there was no destruction, only patterns, only meaning. "If the earth can speak," he whispered again, "then I must build ears to hear it." From that moment, he locked himself in a small wooden workshop in a quiet corner of Luoyang. It wasn't fancy, just a room full of tools, sketches, and metal dust. He started to design something, not a holy object, not a toy, but something real and beautiful. His idea came from old symbols. Dragons, which in Chinese culture stood for power, sky, and earth. And frogs, which often appeared before rain, like they knew when nature was about to change. In Zhang's mind, he imagined 8 dragons, each facing one direction. Each held a small bronze ball in its mouth. Under each dragon, a frog waited with its mouth open, not to eat, but to receive. He drew, he measured, he cut and shaped. His hands became dirty, his eyes tired, but his heart was full of purpose. He was not just building a machine. He was creating a way for humans to listen to the earth before it was too late. When it was finally done, people came to see it. It was large and made of bronze. It stood like a statue in a temple, but it had no incense, no prayers, only cold metal and silent dragon heads. People walked around it confused. Some laughed. "Do you think frogs can save us from earthquakes, Zhang Heng? You've built a child's toy using temple metal. What for?" Zhang just smiled. He knew most people didn't understand. They only saw the shape, not the idea behind it. But that was okay. He believed the beauty of the design would hide the power inside. He asked the royal court to place the device in the main hall. Some officials said no, but because Zhang had gained respect after the Longxi earthquake, they finally agreed. The bronze jar stood in the center of the room, surrounded by stone floors and old wooden pillars. For days, the bronze ball stayed still, not a sound, until one morning. Clink! One of the balls dropped. It landed in the mouth of the frog facing west. But there was no shaking, no damage. The city of Luoyang was calm. Some officials laughed. "Your machine is broken, Zhang Heng. An earthquake without shaking. Or maybe the frog was just hungry." But Zhang stayed calm. He simply said, "Wait for news from the west." Day 1 passed. Nothing. Day 2, still no news. But on the 3rd day, a rider arrived, covered in dust and dirt. His face was tired. He brought a message. The region of Shiping, west of here, had a strong earthquake 3 days ago. Many buildings fell. People were hurt and killed. We came as fast as we could. The room fell silent. The same people who had laughed now stared at the bronze jar with new eyes. It had no voice, no magic, but somehow it knew before anyone else. Zhang stepped forward and gently touched the dragon's head that dropped the ball. He said nothing, but in his heart he understood this was the first time in human history that we had heard the voice of the earth before we felt it. And the machine, once called a toy, now became something more, a symbol of knowledge far ahead of its time. The bronze jar now stood proudly in the palace hall, surrounded by stone floors and tall wooden pillars, Zhang Heng's invention was no longer seen as strange. Ever since the first ball fell and proved to be right, many people had begun to admire it. Some called it amazing. Others said it was a holy object. Some even bowed in respect when they walked past it. But Zhang never wanted worship. He only wanted to listen to the earth. Every morning, he came to the palace. He checked the dragon heads, cleaned the bronze balls, and made sure the mechanism was working. He didn't need applause. He only wanted one thing, the truth. But praise is like a sharp knife. It can turn on you. The more people admired the machine, the more fear began to grow in their hearts. Some government officials started whispering behind closed doors. If this machine can predict earthquakes, does that mean it can predict the fall of the empire? What if the people believe this jar more than the sky? If they trust Zhang more than the emperor, what happens next? Fear began to spread like a crack under the floor. From respect came doubt. From belief came suspicion. Then, it happened. It was a quiet morning. The sky was clear. The air was calm. Everything seemed normal until... Clink! One of the bronze balls dropped. It landed in the mouth of the frog facing north. Heads turned, but the ground didn't shake. There was no earthquake. Zhang froze. His face turned pale. The officials looked at each other. One of them laughed. The machine is broken. Or maybe the frog was just hungry again. Day 1 passed. No news. Day 2, nothing. On day 3, the whispers grew louder. Accusations began. Zhang is lying to us. This machine is a trick. It's not science. It's a threat to the people's faith. Zhang didn't argue. He said nothing. His eyes were blank. That night, he didn't return to the palace. He stayed alone in his workshop. His desk was full of old sketches, notes, and one small rock, the same cracked stone he had picked up as a child after the earthquake. He touched it gently. The crack was still there, still the same. But this time he wasn't sure. Was this really a message? Or just a broken stone I wanted to believe in? He checked the jar again, opened every part. The dragons, the mechanism, the weights. Everything worked just as it should. So why did the ball fall? If the earth stayed silent? The next morning, the palace was noisy. Some officials wanted the jar moved. Others wanted it destroyed. We don't need a dragon mouth, people believe, more than the mouth of heaven. The people must trust the emperor, not a machine. But one voice remained calm. The same old advisor who once believed in Zhang spoke softly. Sometimes the earth speaks too early. It's not the earth's fault if we are too slow to hear. The room went quiet, but even those words weren't enough to stop the growing doubt. Day 5, day 6, still no news. Then, on day 7, just when everyone began to forget the ball had ever dropped, a messenger arrived, weak and covered in mud. The north. A big earthquake. Landslides blocked the roads. We couldn't get through. Many homes were destroyed. There were many injured. The palace froze. No one spoke. But Zhang wasn't there. He was still in his workshop, sitting on the floor, looking at his bronze jar. He gave a small, tired smile. Not proud, just peaceful. He touched the cracked stone again. The line was still there. But this time, he no longer doubted it. The ball didn't fall by mistake, he whispered. It just spoke, before its time. And for the first time, Zhang asked himself, does the earth really want to be heard? Or is it speaking only to itself? The autumn wind moved gently through the small wooden workshop. On the table, a cloth covered a machine that hadn't been touched for days. The small cracked stone still lay beside it, silent, holding the story of everything that had happened. Zhang Heng sat quietly in the corner. His body was tired, but his eyes were calm. After the second ball proved to be right, there was no celebration, no awards, no statue in the center of town. The world returned to silence, as if it had never doubted him. But Zhang knew, truth doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it only arrives to sit in silence. He never returned to the palace. He chose to stay away from power, from noise, and from people's need for recognition. He returned to where it all began, the quiet place where he first listened to the voice of the earth. There he spent his final days surrounded by notes, sketches, and the machine that once spoke ahead of time. "I don't want to be remembered as a great man," he once said to a young student. "I just want to be remembered as someone who listened." No one knows exactly when he died. Some say he passed away in his sleep, surrounded by his tools and old papers. Others say he died while drawing one last wave pattern on the wooden wall. Whatever the truth, time moved on. Dynasties changed. The palace fell. The bronze jar disappeared, lost, stolen, or buried. But his drawings and notes survived, waiting for someone to understand them again. Thousands of years later, his work was found once more. In 2005, a group of scientists in China at the Zhengzhou Institute of Technology studied Zhang Heng's descriptions. They read about the dragons, the frogs, the metal balls, and the hidden system inside. They didn't have the original machine, but they had something else: curiosity. Using modern tools and technology, they built a new version of the jar. Inside, they placed a pendulum, a free-hanging weight that could move when the ground shook. When an earthquake came from one direction, the pendulum would swing, press a small trigger, and release the metal ball from the dragon's mouth. The ball would fall into the frog's mouth below, pointing to the direction of the earthquake. In laboratory tests, the machine worked. It could detect small artificial earthquakes and show the right direction. The scientists were amazed. Zhang Heng designed this over 1,800 years ago. No electricity, no sensors, no digital parts. We can copy the shape, but not the soul. Even though the device was rebuilt, something still felt missing. The new version was not as accurate as the one described in ancient records. Some parts were too sensitive. Some movements were too smooth. It was too perfect for the time it was made. Maybe Zhang used more than logic. Maybe he used something deeper, something he felt with his hands and his heart. Today, that machine stands in a modern museum. It sits behind a glass case under soft lights. Children look at it with wonder. Adults read the sign slowly. The plaque says, "Zhang Heng, inventor of the world's first seismoscope, year 132 AD. Its full mechanism is still not completely understood. And in that quiet room, the space between past and present feels very small, as if the jar is still listening, still holding a message from the earth. Some technology, the final narrator says, was not made to be understood, but to remind us that once a human was close enough to the earth to hear it before it cried out.